There we go. My name is Keone Wilkes, and this is the first presentation of the class. I chose to do mine on body-worn cameras for law enforcement. So what am I even talking about? Well, it's a piece of law enforcement equipment pictured right down here. These are two different models. These are cameras used to capture both audio and video of an incident. They're worn by law enforcement officers across the United States. They're primarily used for documentation of incidents, no matter what you may respond to out in the field, and they're a pretty reliable and compact tool. I forgot to mention also in here they're also a political device. That's the reason why they were created, but that's what we're going to get into right now. So a little history behind the lens, why these things even came about, why do we feel the need to film different incidents, and why do police feel the need to do so? Well, it started in 2013. There was a survey done of 500 police departments, and it showed that out of those 500, only 25% of them had cameras. So that leads us into the fall of 2014, where police departments in Washington, D.C., New York City, and Los Angeles, they launched a pilot test for these cameras. So that was mainly to see, hey, are these worth even investing in? As you'll see later, they're very expensive to maintain, so they wanted to see if it was a long-term investment, if it was a good long-term investment at that. And then the pivotal decision was made in August of 2014 with the Ferguson shooting of Michael Brown. Now, I'm not going to get into that case because that could be an entire presentation on its own. But if you guys don't remember that one, essentially there was a police shooting of an unarmed African-American male by the name of Michael Brown. The city of Ferguson, Baltimore went absolutely crazy because the police officer was not indicted on any charges. And I think we all remember the Ferguson riots. So because of that, in December of 2014, President Barack Obama advocated for the federal government to issue grants for half the cost of department body cameras. So President Obama wanted federal aid, so the government was going to pay for half the cost of these department body cameras, and that's a huge deal because, as you'll see here, about give or take 7 months later, in September of 2015, that money actually came through, and that was estimated at about $23.2 million from federal government, and specifically the Department of Justice, to 73 local agencies in 32 states. And then this is not really within the timeline, but it's important to kind of gauge how the American public felt about this. So in 2015, there was a poll that was done that revealed that 88% of Americans advocated for the use of body-worn cameras, and this was on both sides of the political spectrum. So people wanted, originally they thought it was going to be a trap for most police officers because a lot of people, especially on the left side of politics, wanted to see that police brutality was actually a key player in the criminal justice system. And people on the right wing typically wanted to show that that wasn't the case. So that's why I said this was kind of a political device as well. It's because both sides wanted to see what was actually going on in the field. And then in the present day, 2019, these are the standard issue of most police departments. So I know there's a huge gap between 2015 and 2019. All you need to know is that they slowly became more popular. The only real big issue for most departments, especially smaller police departments, was the cost. So a little bit of an anatomy of an Axon body-worn camera. This is the one that I'm most familiar with, is the company Axon. So as you can see here, and kind of follow my cursor right here, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the top view, bottom view, and then the front view. This is the view that you'll see on an officer as it's held right here. So you can see you have basic things like the on and off switch, on and off indicator. Most of these buttons really aren't important. You have a speaker right here for collecting audio. You have the dual channel microphone actually for collecting audio. This will actually output audio. Battery LED, so green, you have battery. Red, you don't have battery. Battery status button, kind of the same thing without the LED. And then as you can see here, it's a pretty good size, I would say, especially when it's worn on an officer. So that's just a little bit of an anatomy of the Axon body camera. So pros, are they effective? Well, for one, it increases the safety of the police and public. And what I mean by this is people act differently when they're being filmed. Chances are that someone's going to be on their best behavior, especially if they feel like they are, caught on audio and video. They're not going to act out, especially towards a police officer when they are being filmed, and that could possibly come to haunt them in court. And the same thing for a police officer. They're always going to act with, the utmost integrity and respect for the public, especially when they know, hey, they're getting filmed and that could be audited at any point. They're pretty small, compact, and discreet, especially if you don't know exactly what the camera is. It just looks like another piece of equipment for on a police officer. They improve police accountability and integrity. So kind of what I was saying before, police are going to act very differently and respectfully when they have, something that's recording them at all times. It's an excellent learning tool and a training tool. So this goes both ways, but mainly for law enforcement. They can go back and look at footage from especially incidents where something actually happened. They can look back and say, hey, what could I do better? Or what could we do better as a department? And that also goes for the public as well. When you watch these body camera footage tapes, you can see why, or you could see how the public can really interact with police officers without anything really happening. It's also a pro that it records both audio and video. Video without audio can only have so much context and vice versa. So it's good that it collects both. The video cannot be tampered or altered. So that works really well in the court of law if these were ever to be subpoenaed, or if this footage ever had to have something to do with the outcome of a court case, as you'll see later, then that's good. It can't be tampered with, and so you're getting concrete evidence. And there's also something called the 30-second rule that you'll see come into effect here when I talk about a court case. But essentially, when you hit record, whatever happened 30 seconds before you hit record is also saved. Both audio and the video is saved from 30 minutes before. So that's really pivotal, and you'll see here. So the cons, are they controversial? Well, they're very expensive to purchase and maintain. An Axon body camera by itself, and I got this from Google, is about $700, and you think about that's only one police officer. Another fact that I heard is that to equip the Bakersfield Police Department, so City of Bakersfield Police Department, they have a force of about 200 officers. That costs about $440,000 in the first year, and then every year after that, $240,000 for maintenance on these things. As you can see here, the cost is just substantial, especially to departments that may not have such a great budget. I mean, that could be the deal breaker right there. People also feel like it invades the privacy of citizens and exposes victims. Now, this isn't always the case, as obviously you have to record critical incidents, but what I mean by this is there's a law called HIPAA, and HIPAA protects people, it protects their medical rights, so the medical records, and that also happens out on calls. So let's say you are filming an incident where you went out and there's, someone's badly been injured. They may not want that filmed, or that also is the case with rape victims or sex crimes, things like that. They may not want to be filmed, and that they may feel exposed. So in turn, that can actually damage the relationship between the public and the agency, because they think, hey, they're filming me. That's really weird. I really don't want that. And that may decrease the safety for the police officer, because people may not want to be filmed. They may turn against the officer, or they may feel like their life is threatened because they're being filmed. So I don't want to be biased at all. So I took two cases to talk about, and one of them, it worked out for the police department, and in the other case, these cameras worked against the police department. So I'm going to start with the one where it worked against the police department. So this is notable case number 1. This happened January 26, 2017. And this involved the Baltimore Police Department. So essentially what happened was Officer Richard, I'm going to go with Pinheiro. How about Pinheiro Jr.? places a bag of white capsules in a can and left it laying in an alley. Officer Pinheiro then leaves the alley to link up with other officers of his unit. As you'll see in the pictures, they're part of an undercover unit, where he then proceeds to turn on his camera. Now, I put that in quotes because he forgot that the camera retains up to 30 seconds of footage before the camera's turned on. That's why I wanted to explain that earlier on. And so what it looked like was that he was planning drugs, and then he went over to his unit and then turned on his camera, quote unquote, thinking that it wouldn't capture that. And then he's like, "Hey guys, I found some stuff. Like, let's go check this out." And they're like, "Whoa, how did you see that?" You know what I mean? So he was indicted on charges of tampering with evidence. The charges were dropped against the actual suspect they were investigating, which is worse because if you read into the case a little bit, it seemed like they actually had some decent charges on the suspect. So all of that was thrown out because the suspect's attorney got hold of this camera footage and goes, "Hey, it looks like you're planning drugs on my client, and that's not going to fly." So the officer's defense was that he was trying to reenact how the suspect hid the drugs. So, I mean, this could go either way, but why wouldn't you just say that? Because it seems like on the video, and if you do want to research that, you could just type in exactly the case here. He doesn't say that in the video, so it does look very suspicious. And because of this, the charges were dropped against the suspect, and the Baltimore Police Department changed their policy on when the body camera should be turned on. So basically they said, any incident you go out on, turn it on throughout the entirety of the incident and only turn it off when you feel that it needs to be turned off. So that's a case where it worked against the police department, and I have some pictures here. So this is actually 3 pictures. You just follow my cursor, it's a little bit of a collage. So this first picture on the left is from the point of view from Pinheiro's body camera, and you can see that he has a bag of white capsules. He then places it in the second picture in this can, and then there's a little wooden plank right here that he used to put over it, so it looked like it was covered. Goes over to his guys who are an undercover unit, I'm assuming a narcotics unit, and he's like, "Hey, come check this out. I found some stuff." And they're like, "Whoa, dude, you made a giant bust," but really you didn't. So you can see here that it says Axon right here. Axon, that means that it's an Axon body camera, and that's pretty clear footage. So that's a case where it worked against them, and now a case where it worked in the officer's favor. So this case involved the LAPD. Happened on April 20th, 2019, so actually fairly recently, at 2100 hours or 9 o'clock at night. And Officer Trujillo and his partner of the LAPD Gang Task Force initiated a traffic stop on a vehicle that ran a red light. So just a basic traffic stop. They said, "Hey, you can't run a red light, bud." So they went over and they stopped them. They lit him up, and that suspect, who was driving a BMW, he bails on foot, which is never a good thing to do. He bails on foot and starts running into an apartment complex where it is noted by the officers that he has a gun. And I say that because you hear that the officers tell dispatch, "I think he has a gun. He's in his waistband," and it's suspicious, right? So during the pursuit, the suspect circles around an apartment building and then flees northbound. Both officers continue to pursue the suspect. The lead officer continues after the suspect, and that's when a bystander named Curly Lee Duff decides to open fire on the second officer, which is Officer Trujillo. So Officer Trujillo returns fire and mitigates the threat. He made full recovery. The suspect, Duff, also survived the incident but faces an attempted murder charge. So not really the way I thought that this case was going to go. I thought maybe the suspect that bailed on foot would have something to do with it, but actually he had nothing to do with it. Another bystander by the name of Curly Lee Duff decided to get involved, and he opened fire on the officer, and people were saying how great of a guy that this guy was, and he would never do anything like that, but the body cam footage says just a little bit different. So I have 2 pictures here. I'm just going to kind of go over them a little bit to paint the picture a little bit, because I know that giant jarble of words kind of confuse you a little bit. So this first picture here on the left If you follow my cursor, up here was where they initiated the traffic stop. Suspect bails, and then the two officers go after him. Officer number 1 is unnamed, and officer number 2 is Officer Trujillo. And then the driver circles around this apartment building and then bails northbound. So they're gone. And then if you keep an eye on our little friend over here, Curly Duff, he is noticing what's happening as it's unfolding, and he's thinking, all right, well, I want to get involved. So if you come over here to the left, to put this into perspective, that first driver that they were after is somewhere up here, somewhere. And then officer number 1 is going to continue after him. But Curly Duff decides to go to the left a little bit and open fire on Officer Trujillo. And so I actually have some footage of that, as you'll see here. So shout out to Donut Operator on YouTube. He's a really cool guy. So I don't know if this will actually have sound, but this first part of the footage is taken from a security camera that's placed inside the complex. So as you can see, that's our suspect Curly Duff here, and then that's Officer Trujillo, who, despite being shot at first, mitigated the threat. So that shows you what training can do. So this next part of the footage is taken from Trujillo's body camera. So happens pretty quick. So this just goes to show, on a completely unrelated note, that officer was very, very calm in that situation, and that amazes me even watching it now. Again, I mean, that's all training right there. So this footage was used against Duff in the court of law, and he got an attempted murder charge, which is amazing. Another guy off the streets, right? So why is this all important, and why did I even do this, presentation on body cameras? Well, it holds officers and the public accountable for their actions. I mean, the footage doesn't lie, right? The video evidence cannot be tampered with and can determine the outcome of any court case. As we've seen both of these cases that I brought up today, it has come to rely on the footage, whether the outcome was for the law enforcement agency or against it. It serves as training footage for officers and the public, learning from past cases, and I'm sure the LAPD can learn from that footage that I just showed you, and they can, I don't know how the officer could have done any better, so they'll probably commend him for that. Overall integrity is upheld both from the public and the law enforcement agency itself, and like I said, the footage really does speak for itself. So I did this because these cameras really do interest me. I currently work for the Ventura Police Department, and talking to officers, some are for them and some are against them. So I wanted to do it on something that I can vouch for, and I want to do a little bit more research on it myself and learn for myself. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little presentation. And I just want to leave off on this little note. That's why I included this picture. We want to be pro-justice, not anti-police. I want to thank you if you did listen to this. Thank you very much, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.